Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Atheneaum Spotlight with Guy McLain. That's Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach. And we're here to talk about what's going on at the Westfield Atheneum, and later in our program, chat a little bit about some of the upcoming stuff happening in the arts around and about in Western Massachusetts. Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. You have a great exhibit going right now at the Atheneum.
We sure do. We have the exhibit of Ruth Kerr's art. She is doing a variety of very interesting paintings related to women's issues, but she does it in a very original way. She takes ancient Greek myths and reworks them. She kind of had this revelation about a decade ago in which she felt like all these Greek myths, all these stories that have kind of come down through our culture and have influenced other stories that are unrelated to the Greek myths. Because we redo these stories, we repeat these kind of same themes that originated with the Greek myths. She takes those stories and reinterprets them because she felt that they were presented from a completely male perspective, and she felt like we should look at it from a different vantage point in the modern era. And so she's created these great paintings. We have almost 40 paintings in the exhibit, and they're just incredible. They're just incredible works. They're very modernist in content, but yet they take a look at not only the Greek myths, but the way artists from Titian in the Renaissance in the 1500s all the way up to 20th century artists, how they've used Greek mythology, but looked at it from a male perspective. So it's a very interesting exhibit.
And how long is the exhibit around till?
The exhibit is up through July 30th. So there's plenty of time for people to come in and see the exhibit.
That's great. And I understand you have a trip planned for folks from the Atheneum to go to Tanglewood this summer.
Yes, we're really looking forward to this. This should be really exciting. That's on July 30th, and it's going to be a great trip. We provide the transportation. We're going to have a bus for people to be transported to Tanglewood. We're going to get there a little early, have a nice dinner at a nice restaurant in Lee, and then we'll go over for the concert. And I'm going to give a little pre-concert talk on the bus as we go there. You know, a bus lecture there.
A bus talk.
Yes, a bus talk. Yes, yeah. There we go. Yeah.
So what is the program at Tanglewood the night that folks go?
That's going to be a really exciting program. It's going to feature 2 Beethoven piano concertos played by, I think, one of the great pianists of our time, Paul Lewis. Paul Lewis he specializes really in Beethoven and Schubert's music, and I think some of his interpretations of the piano sonatas. Beethoven wrote 32 sonatas throughout his career, and they're considered some of the great works of the piano repertoire in classical music. And Paul Lewis's interpretation, I've listened to most of his. He's recorded all 32 of the piano sonatas, and I think some of his interpretations are some of the finest I've ever heard. And so he's going to be there with the Boston Symphony playing 2 Beethoven concertos. Another treat on this program is a performance of a work by Caroline Shaw. Caroline Shaw is a young composer working today in America. She won the Pulitzer Prize at the age of 31, the youngest person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize, and for a choral piece that she did there called 8 Partitas. A wonderful composition. She's also written orchestral works, all kinds of things. And so the Boston Symphony is going to premiere one of her pieces. I think she's one of the most interesting composers working today, and I wish more people knew about her music, because I think she's really doing some of the best compositions in classical music today.
So if people want to go to this trip, it goes from the Atheneum.
Yes.
It includes a bus, and it is it an a la carte meal, or is it the meal included in the ticket?
No, everything's included. That's the beauty of this is your ticket. We're selling the tickets for $145, but that includes transportation, dinner, and excellent tickets in the shed. So it's all included in the price. So I think it's actually a very, very good price considering what you're getting for the money.
Yeah, that's a really good deal.
Yeah.
Plus, you get in the bus afterwards, after the show's over, and you don't wait 25 minutes to get your car out. You just zoom right out.
That's right, and the buses where they have the buses is right close to the gate, very close to the gate. So you don't have to walk, miles to get to your car. Sometimes going up that hill. Sometimes when you have to park up the hill, that's quite a distance to walk. So I think it should be really good. And it's nice too because you don't have to worry about doing all the driving. And of course the concert is a Saturday night, so it's gonna be a crowded evening, and especially with this lineup, I think this is going to be a real draw. So I think it'll be a real big crowd there. So it's nice that transportation is provided for.
Yeah. So do people have to go to the Atheneum to get tickets, or can they buy them online? How does it work?
They can buy them online. We're set up for that, but they could also just come into the Atheneum, go up to the circulation desk, and take care of it right there. We can take care of you either way there.
And you guys just finished a music series of 3 concerts by Musuem, the musicians of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. So the Westfield Atheneum is not only taking people to music, but bringing music to the people.
Yes, these 3 concerts have been so good. Such a variety of music, everything from string quartets to woodwind quintets, a flute quartet by Mozart, and and another one by Haydn. I mean, the range of music in the 3 concerts that we featured at the Atheneum this spring have just been wonderful, and the audience turnout has been great. We've had great audiences for the concerts, and people are really excited. Everybody I talk to that has come to the concert say, I hope you do this again next year, and we certainly hope to do that.
Yeah, I mean, people have come up to me because they know that I'm involved with Musuem and doing some of their publicity, and people have come up to me and said that they really like coming out to the Atheneum to go to shows. And these are people from Springfield and Longmeadow. And I'm thinking, well, wow, that's great that you want to go there. And somebody that I know went to one of the concerts, and they went back to see one of the exhibitions that you had.
Yes, I think a lot of people from around the region, not just Westfield people know the Atheneum well, but I think people from around the region are starting to discover that the Atheneum has a great concert space. The Lang Auditorium has great acoustics. It's perfect for chamber music, and so I think people from Springfield, Longmeadow, other places around I know a couple of people from East Hampton and Northampton who have come down for concerts. So I think people are starting to realize that the Atheneum is a great place to come and hear chamber music because it's not a large auditorium. It's an auditorium that seats about 100 to 120 people comfortably, but it's just perfect for chamber music. You don't want a big, gigantic hall for a string quartet. So it's just a great space to come.
I went to the April concert. And what I found was interesting is the auditorium is not really much bigger than our studio here. And watching the musicians up close like that, and you could almost feel the violinist plucking the strings, and there was an intimacy about it that you just don't get when you go to Symphony Hall or a bigger theater.
Yes.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah, to me, this is the way to hear chamber music. So often, chamber music is performed in symphony halls because that's the venue that is available to classical musicians. And so I think this is a real treat to be able to hear it in a small auditorium where you can be literally 20, 25 feet away from the musicians and really, really have that contact, that personal contact with the musicians. Also, the musicians love it because the acoustics are so good. And I think also some of the musicians said they really like the feel, of being able to interact with the audience in a close space like that.
I talked to two of the musicians that performed in April, and they liked the intimacy of it. And in March, the Moso Chamber did a chamber concert in Symphony Hall, and it was well attended and everything. But there's something about being in a huge hall and seeing a small group of musicians versus being in a hall that's the size of your living room with comfortable chairs and hearing the music. I mean, it's a completely different.
The name chamber music comes from the concept, because when the concept of chamber music originated, the idea was it was going to be in a small room, a chamber, most of the musicians who started, Mozart and Haydn and Bach and those composers, they thought in terms of the space that they were writing for. They didn't have big auditoriums in the classical period, even in the early Romantic period. For the most part, most concerts were in much smaller places. And of course, in Europe, the aristocracy, of course, was the group that was commissioning a lot of classical music at that time. And when they thought of chamber music, they would do it in a small room in the palace. They wouldn't use some big theater. Only in the late 19th century did we start moving classical music into big auditoriums. And that parallels the rise of the symphony orchestra. Mozart, the average size of a symphony in Mozart and Haydn's day in the late 1700s was maybe 24 musicians, maybe 30 musicians at the most, right? The symphony orchestra was much smaller. I'm sure Mozart and Haydn, if they came back today, they'd just be astounded by the size of symphony orchestras. There are 80 to 100 musicians today. But the symphony orchestra didn't reach the proportions, the size that we think of symphony orchestras today until really the late 19th century. Even Brahms, when he was writing some of his early orchestral works, was thinking in terms of orchestra sizes of 50 or 60 musicians. So now like Symphony Hall in Springfield, a great place to perform symphony music, but it's too big really for chamber music. And these early composers, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, Schubert, even Mendelssohn and Schumann wrote chamber music with the idea that it would be performed in a small space. So it's really nice that we can do that here today.
It's very similar to Broadway. If you go to a show on Broadway in New York, the theaters are small. I went a couple of weeks ago, played hooky on a Wednesday and went down for a matinee, and the theater was probably between 15 and 1,800 seats. And it's half the size of the Bushnell in Hartford, where our Broadway shows come, or the Fine Arts Center, or even Springfield Symphony Hall. And seeing a Broadway show on Broadway in a relatively smaller space is a much different experience than going to the Bushnell in Hartford, which is a huge space.
It's a huge, yes. Or the Springfield Symphony Hall is really a huge space, And I think one thing that's very interesting is so many people today, the only way they hear live music, they'll go to a rock concert. And it's in a civic center, or it's outside in a stadium, or these big venues, and it's amplified. There's big, because you're in such a big space, and that experience can be, an incredible experience, right? But I think people who haven't experienced chamber music in a small, intimate space have missed a really interesting live music experience. There's just nothing like hearing 4 or 5 musicians perform in a small chamber where the audience and the musicians are so close together, and there's that connection and that intimacy and that feeling it gives a completely different sense of the music than going to a rock concert in a big, gigantic civic center or stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I like chamber music of certain kinds. I happen to love brass music.
Yes.
And I've seen Moso's brass quintet perform at Symphony Hall as part of the Bay Path presidential inauguration, and it sounds great in the Symphony Hall. But I also saw them perform at St. Andrew's in Longmeadow, which is a small church, and I was probably in the 8th row. And it's a different experience.
It's a completely different experience.
In the same way that Moso doing chamber music at Symphony Hall in March sounded okay. It filled the hall, even though it was only 20 musicians on the stage. But they're coming back in June, June 23rd, with a full orchestra performing the Broadway music of Stephen Sondheim.
Which should be an exciting concert.
Yeah, and
it should be really interesting.
When I went to New York to see a musical, I realized there's maybe 20 musicians in the pit. And we went to see Funny Girl, and it had 14 musicians, 15 in the pit. But to hear Sondheim performed by 60 musicians will be really an awesome experience.
Right.
And then in July, they'll come back and do a full orchestral thing with Kevin Rhodes, their maestro, who was just named the music director for the opera in Bratislava.
Oh, that's interesting. That's great.
In Slovakia.
Yeah.
But he'll be doing opera as well as ballet productions there. And he'll be coming back to do performance with Moso in July.
And that should be a great experience that he's going to Bratislava, because Bratislava now is almost a suburb. It's only about 35 or 40 minutes drive from Vienna. So a lot of people who live in Bratislava go into Vienna. And, of course, Vienna has 3 great opera companies. Probably one of the greatest in the world, the Vienna State Opera. But the Vienna Folks Opera also puts on great productions. And there's also the Concert an der Wien, which is where Mozart premiered the Magic Flute. And so that's a great environment for opera, and the crowd in Bratislava, because they're so close to Vienna, really know great opera. So it's amazing. That says something about Kevin Rhodes.
Well, Kevin Rhodes has always conducted at Vienna at the State Opera Ballet, and now he's got Bratislava, but he's been at La Scala and the Rome Opera Ballet this year, and in Ljubljana, which is, I think, Slovenia.
Yes.
And it's a shame that the Springfield Symphony and him did not come to terms, and he's not there anymore. But it's great that he'll come back and conduct Moso. He is a great resource, and he was part of this community for 20 years.
Yeah, and I don't think that people realize just how important a conductor he is. You have to be really a great musician, a great conductor, to be able to be asked to conduct operas in some of the European opera houses, like Bratislava and Vienna, and some of these other places, because they have such a rich opera tradition there, and they take their opera very, very seriously. And in Austria, in Slovenia, in Germany, Central and Eastern Europe have great opera companies, and I think that the Springfield audience, and I think the Springfield board didn't realize what a resource Kevin Rhodes was. I mean, he's one of the great conductors working today, and we were very, very fortunate to have him in Springfield as long as we did. And I hope we can bring him back a lot more.
Well, he has said, which I'm thrilled about, he said that he would conduct Moso when his schedule permitted. So he will be back July 21st to conduct, and his guest artist will be Evgeny Kutek, who's a young violinist who was brought here. He came from a Russian Jewish family, the refugees, and was brought here from Belarusian by the Jewish Federation. He grew up in America, and he's been performing, and he's going to perform. They're going to do a salute to John Williams and conduct the music from Schindler's List.
And that's the suite. John Williams did a suite version. He took the film music and made it into a 3-movement suite for orchestra, so performed by symphony orchestras, and that's a wonderful piece. I love that piece. It's just so
we're going to take a break here, Guy. When we come back, we've got a guest, and then after our guest is over, then we'll talk a little bit more because between you and me, we probably got some great summer plans
Yes.
of where we're going to be hanging out this summer.
Absolutely.
And this is Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We'll be back after these underwriting announcements, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldstate.bncollege.com.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. That's Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach. And in this next half hour, we're going to celebrate an anniversary. Many of you have heard about the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Art in our valley, and Alexandra Kennedy, who's their executive director, is here to join us and celebrate the Eric Carle Museum's 25th anniversary. And I've got to say, I've been there several times, and also just down the road from them, the Yiddish Book Center, which are two really unique museums, living museums, if you want to call it that, right here in Western Massachusetts.
And on the Hampshire College campus, which I think adds a certain dimension to it, to both of those institutions as well.
Yeah. So, good morning and welcome. And Alex, you need to turn your
unmute. Good morning.
Hi. So it's 25 years for the Eric Carle Museum.
20.
How did the? I
20?
went to the opening.
You said 20 years. 20 years.
20 years.
20.
I went to the opening of it, and I remember meeting Mr. Carle and his wife and being just astounded by the picture book art, because I didn't know anything about him prior to the opening of the museum. But what made Eric Carle choose, or people around here choose to create a museum of his work here in Western Mass?
So Eric and Bobby had been living for many years in the Valley. They had been originally in Hawley, and then they moved to Northampton. And for many, many years, Eric had a studio in downtown Northampton. And so they had gotten the idea of doing the museum, of founding the museum, like in the 80s and 90s. They were traveling a lot in Japan, which was a country they loved. Eric's work was very popular there. And they'd go over to see their publishers. And they saw that in Japan, there were like 20 or 30 picture book art museums. And they kind of got set on fire with this idea, like, why don't we have something like that here in the US? What would it look like if we helped create something like that? So it made a lot of sense for them to do it in their own backyard. And I think they saw that this was, a really vibrant community in terms of supporting art and books. As you mentioned, we have the fabulous Yiddish Book Center practically next door to us. And we have the Emily Dickinson Museum. There's just such a rich history here of books and art. And we also have a huge picture book community of creators, artists and authors who live in this area.
So as it's grown and matured, is today's museum really a retrospective of Eric Carle's work, or is it that the foundation but other artists and programs that are involved?
So we do both. We always have work of Eric's on view. Many people come from all over the world, really with this kind of pilgrimage feeling, and it's really Eric's work that they want to see. I think they particularly love looking at collage. So we try to always have his work on view. We have We take care of several thousand pieces of his work at the museum. And so we rotate through with different exhibitions 2 a year. But we also always have other artists on view. And that was always Eric's intention, was to ensure that he was supporting his colleagues, that there was an opportunity for people to see a range of artists from around the world. So we have, we've shown exhibitions of literally hundreds and hundreds of different artists at the museum.
And how many exhibitions do you program? I mean, coming out of the pandemic, how many exhibitions a year will you be programming?
We typically now do 6 exhibitions a year. So we have 3 galleries. We do 2 in each gallery. We also, which has been a really interesting development for us in the last 5 or 10 years, we also travel our exhibitions. Sometimes they're the exhibitions that appear in our galleries, and sometimes they're exhibitions that we put together from our collection, or working with an artist we know well, or an artist's estate that we know well. And we put those exhibitions on the road. So in Amherst, in a typical, pre-pandemic year, we'd get about 50,000 people at the Eric Carle Museum in Amherst. But in terms of how many people see our exhibitions traveling, that number can be 500,000, 750,000 people in a year. So we're really excited about it, because it's a way for us to really kind of broaden the scope and broaden the kind of impact of the work that we're doing.
And you say that was pre-pandemic. I have to ask, because being in the museum field myself, it's been so hard dealing with the pandemic situation. How were you able to manage that? How did you approach that during a lot of the closures and this sort of thing?
Yeah, we were pretty cautious. We obviously shut down when everybody shut down, and we reopened at the very end of June 2020. And we managed it by really trying to manage the capacity within the museum. We have a few spaces in the museum that are smaller, that are really important to our visitors, like our art studio space where people can go in and make art. And we just knew that it was going to be too difficult to navigate if we had 300 people in the museum on a given day. So we reduced the numbers of people that were coming every day as a way to kind of help with that. And we did close again. We closed again at the end of 2020 when cases were bad again, and then reopened early in the spring. And it's like everybody else. We're doing the best we can, but we have had to close quite a bit. We've also been taking reservations, like a lot of museums are doing. We're encouraging people to buy tickets in advance, because we've sold out on a number of days. We are, as of June, we're going to no longer require reservations, and we think we're in a good place now to be able to manage more people at the museum.
And has that you said about your traveling exhibits, that so many of your visitors, so many people see the exhibits at other museums. I'm sure that was affected by the pandemic, but have you still been able to travel some shows?
Yeah, we have. And, it's been hard. We've seen some of our museum partners, get an exhibition there, install it, get it up, and then they have to close. It's been painful. We've had an exhibition that is not of original picture book art, but is a children's museum style exhibition, like very interactive exhibit that we co-organized with the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. That's been traveling in China, so that of course has run into a number of issues where they've had to shut down. So it's a challenge, but I think as the pandemic has gone on, museums in general have gotten better at figuring out how to manage large crowds and how to try to do everything they can to keep people safe. We still have a mask order in place. We did not lift that anytime in the last. We only lifted it for a short period a year ago, but we've had it in place for quite a while, and I think we're going to keep it in place because it's a way, again, just to ensure that our staff and visitors are as safe as they can be. But we do have exhibitions. We have an incredible exhibition that's on view right now at the New York Historical Society in Manhattan. It's called Picture the Dream, the story of the civil rights movement through children's books. Really powerful exhibition. It started at the High Museum in Atlanta, where we co-organized with them. The High is a big museum. It's a big contemporary art museum, has many, many more resources than we do, many times the size of us. But they're really interested in picture book art, and it's I think the 5th exhibition we've done together with them. but it was hard. The curator of that show is this brilliant woman named Andrea Davis Pinkney. And so Andrea and myself and our curator, Ellen Kiter, we'd all been working on that show for a few years, couldn't wait to see it. And then, it opened in Atlanta in the summer of 2020, and we weren't able to go see it. So it's a little bit of heartbreak, but we did get there for the opening at the New York Historical Society. And it's a beautiful show, and they're going to get thousands and thousands of visitors there. So we're very happy about that. I can, there's been you can feel it in the last few months, just museums are now again committing to the plans that they have and feeling like one way or another, they're going to figure out how to make things work. So things are really kicking into gear.
One question I had, putting the Eric Carle Museum in perspective, how many people work at the museum? What's your average audience a year, and what kind of budget do you have to work with?
Yeah, so we have about 40 people on staff, full and part-time. It's a pretty heavily staffed museum. We have a good size education staff, which is very important work to us. We do a lot of professional development. And we've felt like we have to staff up a little bit in terms of having a lot of people there to greet guests and be in our galleries and work directly with the public. We've wanted to have sort of additional resources for the staff as they've kind of navigated the complexities of dealing with the pandemic. So that is we've gone up a little bit in size, but we're essentially usually somewhere between 38 and 40 staff members. I'm trying to remember now your other question. Oh, we see the average is pre-pandemic about 50,000 people a year. I couldn't actually give you the numbers for the pandemic. They're not etched in my brain, but they're obviously much lower because of the closures. We have been seeing just in the last, I'd say, 8 weeks, we've been seeing increased visitation. And I think people are out and traveling again. A lot of people very eager to be out with their families. I also think a lot of people have had to kind of reconsider their plans of if they're not able to take the vacation they wanted for spring break, for example, they might be more interested in doing day trips. So I think if we dug into the numbers, I wouldn't be surprised if what we're seeing is we're getting more people from the region and fewer people from beyond the region than in previous years.
And I know that in the museum field, one of the things that's very important is school visitation. I know that's something that is really important, and I'm sure that was impacted. But have you been able to renew, especially for a museum like the Eric Carle? I think school visitation would be very important. Have you been able to renew that yet, or is that in the future plans?
It's in the future plans. We're going to start up in the fall again. And interestingly, and this is something that. There are a couple of silver linings to this dreadful time we've all been through. And one of them for museums is that COVID really changed the culture in terms of people's willingness to do things virtually. And we had wanted for years to be able to do more education work virtually, but there wasn't, it just sort of wasn't foremost in people's minds. And so, our educators would get on a plane and fly to Seattle to meet with a community of schools and do programs, which wasn't very efficient for us and can be difficult in terms of covering costs. So one of the things that's happened during the pandemic is we're doing many, many school visits and a number of sort of professional development workshops with, teachers and librarians virtually. And that has really taken off and is afforded a lot more people the opportunity to interact with us, which has been great. And I hope that aspect will continue. The number one comment we get on social media, or at least did before the pandemic, was "wish I lived closer." And so I think we're now kind of bridging that a little bit in a way we hadn't been able to do before.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters. But before we do, can you give us information on how people can learn more about the Eric Carle Museum, either through the websites or online, and the hours that people can visit and the fees to visit and all of the general information?
Yeah, all that good information is right on our website, which is carlemuseum.org, CARLE museum.org. We just redesigned our website. That was one of the things we did during the pandemic. So it's a really fun site. You get to look at lots of wonderful art on there. And it has all the information about visitation, about, our hours, our admission costs, if you are unable to afford admission, what other opportunities there might be for you to come. So it's all there on the site.
Terrific. This is Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're chatting with Alexandra Kennedy from the Eric Carle Museum, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. If you've missed a part of this morning's program, or you want to play it again or share it with friends, we're archived on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio, and we'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Barnes & Noble College Bookstore in the Ely Campus Center, offering Westfield State t-shirts, sweatshirts, and gift merchandise, all of your academic needs, and offering textbook materials in new, used, ebook, and rental formats. Available at the bookstore on campus or online at westfieldstate.bncollege.com.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Join us every Thursday morning
from 6 until at least 7:30.
Check out the Bobby G and Company Show
right here on WSKB 89.5
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. That's Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach, the host of On the Mark and Arts Beat. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Eric Carle Museum in Amherst with its executive director, Alexandra Kennedy. Somebody asked me during the break, who is Eric Carle and what it makes him famous worldwide as an artist?
So Eric is legendary. He was one of the most beloved illustrators of our time. He died in 2021. He died last year at the age of 91. We're still heartbroken and miss him terribly. So Eric was he was a genius picture book maker. He was an artist and an author. His style was collage. That was, most of his books were created from collage, where he would tear and cut painted tissue papers. He would paint them himself in these beautiful colors. They were like works of art in themselves, and then cut and paste them into these beautiful collages. Many of his books celebrated animals. He was a great nature lover. He also had many books about friendship, which was very important to him. Eric, he led a very interesting life. He was a great lover of art and museums. That's why he and Bobby got this idea of creating the Eric Carle Museum. He's probably best known. What I have found is if people don't recognize his name immediately, then you say The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and then they say, "Oh, I know The Very Hungry Caterpillar." The Very Hungry Caterpillar is one of the best-selling books of all time. The facts and figures I've heard is it sells at least every 30 seconds somewhere in the world, which is really just a crazy statistic. He created it in 1969. It was his third book, and it was a sensation. And one of the things that was so interesting about the book was that it was really a book that has, as you probably know, it has die cuts on the pages. So children could put their fingers through different holes, touch different things. And so it really became almost like an interactive book. It was a book that children could treat almost like a toy. And it was enormously appealing and still is. And so there are generations and generations of Very Hungry Caterpillar readers out there. It's also a book that is very popular around the world. Much of Eric's work, like Brown Bear, What Do You See? A number of his books sell really well around the world. And so he just had a tremendously big fan base and was somebody who I think never took that for granted. He always felt like he was very lucky that he'd had a lot of great teachers and supporters who helped him in his career. And I think he wanted to give back in that same way.
Is any of his signature works on permanent display at the museum, or do they rotate in and out of exhibition?
That's a great question. They rotate. Almost all of the work in our collection, we care for more than 10,000 pieces at the museum. Our permanent collection is about 8,000, and the vast majority of it is works on paper. And as anybody knows, whoever hung a piece of their children's art on a refrigerator, paper is very sensitive to light and exposure. So we're very careful about how long we exhibit work. Typically, we call it resting, where we put the art, we restore the art and put it back in the vault, so that we can extend the lifetime of that art. We want it to last for hundreds of years, and that means being very, very cautious about how long it's exposed.
When he and his wife decided to start this museum, and again, I remember going early in its inception when it opened, did they think of it as a repository for his work, or did that happen over time, or did he think about it as works of other artists? Did he have a vision?
His vision, you actually answered the question. The vision was both. So Eric, by the time the museum was being conceptualized, late 1990s, he had a large body of work. And as anybody knows, particularly for illustrators, it can be very challenging managing that many, managing thousands of pieces of work and making sure that you're using all the right, all the right sort of professional, your guidelines as to how to store them. They need to be in the right temperature. They need to have the right humidity in the room. There's a lot of work that goes behind preserving that work. And so Eric and Bobby knew that that they were going to need to find a more permanent way of thinking through how that work was going to be cared for. So that was one of the motivations. And then the other motivation was really that Eric felt that picture book art really deserved a kind of first-class museum in the United States, that it needed, it really deserved to be treated like fine art. And we sort of hear this argument less now than we would have even 20 years ago, where people like to distinguish between, say, fine art and illustration. And illustration was sometimes frowned upon as work that was created to be reproduced, and as if it makes it less work, when in fact the artistry that goes into illustration is no different than the artistry that goes into fine art. It's just what happens with that piece of art can be different. So Eric really wanted to kind of help elevate the reputation of picture book art. And that meant opening up the museum to a collection that we currently have about 240 artists in our collection. The work spans about 120 years. So he wanted to open it up both in terms of the collection and in terms of the exhibitions and what we were showing the public, to the tremendous variety of artwork and art styles that are out there.
Yeah. Will you be doing any special exhibitry or programming because it's the 20th anniversary?
Yeah, we're really excited. On June 25th, we're opening an exhibition called Celebrating Collage, a 20th anniversary exhibition. We first started working on this several years ago. At the time, we imagined we would be celebrating with Eric our 20th anniversary. And of course, when he passed away last May, it was almost a year ago. It'll be a year ago next week. We felt like this exhibition took on even more sort of urgency for us. We had conceptualized it really as a way to pay tribute to Eric because he was such a master collage artist himself. And we saw it also as a way to pay tribute to some of the artists that were very important to him. He found a great mentor in Leo Leone, who was a brilliant artist of many different kinds in New York, and had really helped Eric get his footing early in his career. And he was also friends with Ezra Jack Keats, who's best known for The Snowy Day. I think they were at some point bachelors hanging out in downtown in New York in Eric's youthful days. And we saw it as a way to also pay tribute to those great collage artists. And then kind of pull a thread and bring it all the way through the decades to contemporary artists who are working now. So we selected 20 different artists. It's all the way up to young artists working in the medium now. And we'll be exhibiting about 90 artworks. What's really fun and exciting about collage is it's so tactile. You can go in there and you can really look at this original work and see how it was made. You can see the artist's hand right in that. And so it's very accessible from a viewer standpoint, but for an artist standpoint, it's really creative and inspires a lot of invention and innovation. So we're going to have pieces that have, seashells in them, or one of the pieces has oatmeal in it, like literally in the collage. There are buttons and all sorts of fabric. And so it really encourages people to use all sorts of found objects. And so there's going to be some stunning pieces. We have two artists, Julie Flett and Nina Cruz, who both work digitally. So they scan different materials that they find really inspiring, and then they bring that together as digital artists. So we want to show there's a lot of digital art being created now for picture books. So that's a way for us to sort of show that process. And we even have a fabulous artist, Ed Young. He's in his 90s. He came to the United States when he was a very young man, came here from China. He's a fascinating man with a fascinating history. And he is his work is going to be they're like shadow puppets. So it's going to be projected. And it's another way of showing, collage, which is that collage when you project and you have different, you use different objects to create different layers. And we were like, yeah, I think that's collage. That would be really fun and exciting to show that in the exhibition. So we're really excited about it. We think it's going to be a really just warm, welcoming, joyful exhibition celebrating the history of picture books.
Now, I have to ask one question, because there's another children's museum in Western Massachusetts, the Dr. Seuss Museum in Springfield. Do you do any collaborations with them? Because it's and also too, it occurs to me, one of the things I think about in the museum field is trying to do things where you're drawing people from who have similar interests. I wondered, have you tried to do anything in collaboration with Dr. Seuss Museum?
Yeah, we've done, in addition to just some professional sharing, we've done some marketing efforts where people can buy tickets. And it's actually for the Dr. Seuss Museum, the Springfield museums, including the Dr. Seuss Museum, for the Carle, and for the Norman Rockwell Museum, which for anybody who loves illustration is another amazing place to go, and only an hour from the Valley.
Right.
So I'd really encourage anybody to check that out. They have an incredible show coming up that's opening very soon called Imprinted, that looks at the history of the illustration of Black people throughout the last, I think, more than 100 years. And it's going to be a really important and provocative show. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
We are unfortunately out of time, but I hope at some point you'll come back and share more about the Eric Carle Museum down the road.
I would love to do that. I so appreciate you asking me to be on today.
Yeah, we've been chatting with Alexandra Kennedy from the Eric Carle Museum in Amherst. They're celebrating their 20th anniversary. And before we run off to acknowledge some underwriters, give us the website for more information.
So it's carlemuseum.org, C-A-R-L-E museum.org. Has everything you need to learn about what we're doing.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a break, and Guy and I will be back to chat more on Atheneum Spotlight, so don't go away.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Saturdays were made for polka. Tune in to the Polka Jammer Network starting at 6 a.m. and Polka Hall of Famer Billy Bellina, Breakfast at BB at 8:30.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. That's Guy McLain, and I'm Mark Auerbach. I'm the host and producer of On the Mark and Arts Beat. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We've got a couple of minutes here, Guy. So what are some of the things you're planning to be doing this summer in terms of arts around and about?
Well, I love to go to Tanglewood, so I'm already, the schedule for Tanglewood has already come out. It looks great. In addition to the July 30th trip that with the Atheneaum crowd, I'm going to do a lot of individual trips to Tanglewood. Also, too, I'm really excited. One of the great American composers working today, John Adams, who's based in the San Francisco area, is premiering a new opera, Antony and Cleopatra, in September, and so I'm trying to figure. I'm putting all my little nickels and dimes together, and I'm going to fly out and go to the premiere of this opera. I think he's one. He may be America's greatest living composer, and he's done several wonderful operas in the past.
Where is that premiering?
At the San Francisco Opera. So I'm going to fly out to San Francisco and see that. San Francisco Opera is a wonderful opera company. They've got a great auditorium there in San Francisco, and the company is really, really active and really good. And so this should be a real treat. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Is this the Antony and Cleopatra like that was in the movie with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton?
Absolutely, yes. So I think this should be really good.
Does she clutch a snake at the end?
I don't know. I don't know how John Adams is going to do it. John Adams takes a very original approach to opera. He does things he's written really kind of strange, unexpected operas. Nixon in China. Who would have thought you could do an opera based on Nixon in China? Death of Klinghoffer, which is about terrorism. I mean, that's what an interesting opera subject that is. Dr. Atomic is another one of his operas about the invention of the atomic bomb. So he has traditionally done very kind of unusual themes for opera, but has always done just a tremendous job. I think he's one of the leading opera composers in the world today, and so here he's coming out with a new opera. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm a quasi-opera fan. I mean, I like new opera, and Jake Heggie is one of my favorite composers,
yes.
And one of his works, 3 Decembers, is being done at Berkshire Opera Festival.
Oh, that sounds very interesting.
We'll have to do a field trip.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. Because I agree, he's a really interesting opera composer too, and has done some great work.
Yeah, but we don't have a lot of opera in our area. There's the Connecticut Lyric Opera, which just performed Handel's Caesar in Egypt. And we've got the Berkshire Opera Festival. So, we have to travel, go to the Met and all of those good things.
I wish we had more opera in New England.
Well, there's an interesting thing happening. There is an opera on its way to the Met by Anthony Davis, who's a young African-American composer who wrote...
just won the Pulitzer Prize for music.
Right. Yeah. He wrote this opera story of Malcolm X, and back in its first workshop, the Springfield Symphony Orchestra performed it at Symphony Hall back in the 80s. And it's been reworked and redone, and now it is being performed in Detroit. It's being performed in Boston, where it's going to be recorded and then goes to the Met. Yeah. So, some of this contemporary opera is really cool.
Yes, and I think Anthony Davis is another composer who's doing really interesting work. He comes out of a jazz tradition. Back in the 1970s, you would have thought of him primarily as a jazz pianist. That's what he was kind of most known for, but then in the 80s he started writing operas and symphonic music. The Boston Contemporary Orchestra has put out a recording of his works, and he combines jazz with a classical music tradition and even a little bit of minimalism in his music. And so he's another really interesting composer working today. And I think his combination of jazz and classical music together is some of the most unique music being written today. So that's also going to be a real treat.
So I suppose on June 12th, you're going to be, on Sunday, June 12th, you're going to be sitting glued to the TV to watch the Tony Awards.
There we go. We'll see what what the awards are this year.
It'll be interesting. In some of the shows, I mean, you talked about Ruth Kerr's work about the underworld. I can't remember which.
About the Greek myths.
The Greek myths.
And how she reinterprets them.
One of the Tony Award-winning musicals of a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, was Hadestown, which is the story of the underworld, Orpheus in the underworld. That's coming to the Bushnell.
Yeah, and let me point out, Ruth Kerr in her art has used the Orpheus myth in some of her paintings. So isn't it interesting that here John Adams is doing something for the ancient Greek and Roman world, and and we have these operas coming out that are on these themes. So I guess that's the way to approach modern opera and art today.
Yeah, and for those of you, I mean, the Tony Awards will certainly predict the musicals and plays that are going to be coming our way in the next couple of years, although our theaters like Barrington Stage and Hartford Stage and Theater Works are sending stuff to New York. And in Hartford right now is a musical that started on the West Coast. It's by John Leguizamo. It's called Kiss My Aztec. It's the story of Latin American history, and it's at the Hartford Stage right now. It's on its way to Broadway. So you want to catch next season's big Broadway hit, you can catch that at Hartford Stage.
Yeah, much closer to home, right? So much
exactly.
easier. Yeah.
And Hartford Stage sent Anastasia and A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder to Broadway. The Bushnell has a pre-Broadway run of a play with Harriet Harris and Jeremy Jordan coming, and it's about a playwright who is at odds with the leading lady of a play and wants to kill her off, and the director has to salvage the situation. And it stars Jeremy Jordan and Harriet Harris and Andre DeShields, and that'll be doing a pre-Broadway tryout at the Bushnell this summer. So there's a lot of good stuff happening.
There is both in music and opera and in the Broadway stage. It's amazing what's around here.
Yeah, and I'm real excited because I'm a Stephen Sondheim fanatic, and we lost him last year after a prolific career. And Barrington Stage is doing a little night music, which I love.
That should be really interesting. That should be a great show.
Yes, Send in the Clowns from that.
Yes,
and
yes.
The most of the musicians of the Springfield Symphony are doing an all Sondheim program in Symphony Hall on June 23rd. With Tim Stella, who is the longtime conductor of Phantom of the Opera on Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim is bringing two of his Phantom stars, Hugh Pinero and Lisa Vroman, to Symphony Hall. They're going to do Sondheim's greatest hits, along with their co-stars are Ray Hardman, who may be familiar to people. He's the host of Morning Edition and All Things Considered on Connecticut Public Radio.
Yeah.
And his wife, Kathleen Callahan Hardman, who's an opera singer who sings with Pan Opera in Northampton. So that's happening in June, so you'll have to hang out with us there.
Yeah, there's a lot coming up. I mean, it should be a great summer and fall here with what's just around us within hour and a half drive, no more. Yeah.
And right here in our backyard, I mean, the Atheneaum has a million things happening all summer, plus the Tanglewood trip.
Yes.
Plus all kinds of summer vacation programs.
Yeah. Our summer reading program starts in the latter part of June. runs through July and August. That's always very popular. Great thing for the kids to do in the summer. Keep them, if parents are looking for something to do, they should really come by the library and check out some of the programs for the kids this summer.
Okay, and before we go, how do people find out about the Atheneum?
Westath.org is our website, WESTATH, short for Atheneum, .org. We have everything on the website, all the programs coming up, so that's the best place to go. And I always say to people, check it out once a week, because we have so many programs. You have to check it out very often to see all the things coming up at the Atheneum.
And when we do Atheneum Spotlight in a couple of weeks, we tape another one. You've got a couple of videos that you've made showing some of the artwork that Ruth Cares is currently exhibiting at the Atheneum. So go see it live and then check us out in a couple of weeks and learn the backstory.
Yeah, this is it's a nice video which gives an introduction to her work, because there's a lot of content in her work, and so we put together this video that I think will be very interesting for people and help people get a kind of an insight into some of the, I think, one of the most original artists working in New England today. So people should both come to the exhibit to see the work, right there, but then also this video will give a kind of a good insight into her work.
And a One Tanglewood trip coming up.
And the One Tanglewood trip, July 30th, featuring Paul Lewis, one of the great Beethoven interpreters of our day, and the music of Caroline Shaw, one of the most interesting young composers working today in America.
Plus an on-bus program notes featuring Guy McLain.
Yes.
That's unique. How many people get to hear about classical music when they're on a bus?
When they're on a bus, yes. Yeah, I have to, get the microphone, and a lot of the time these bus microphones, you have to hold the button down to do it. So I have to hold that button down for the whole length of the lecture.
Yeah, are you traveling back and forth so you can say, and as we're talking about Haydn, on your right is Lake whatever?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's almost like a driving tour and a lecture at the same time, yes.
That sounds great. We're out of time today, but you've been watching Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. If you missed a part of today's program, want to watch it again, share it with friends, on all of the back Atheneum Spotlights are all on WSKB Community Radio. So you can spend the entire afternoon or evening with Guy McLain and Mark Auerbach.
And they're all very interesting.
They're all fabulous. You've got to watch them more than once.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another edition of On the Mark or Atheneum Spotlight. Have a good week.
When you think you've hit the bottom and you're feeling really low, you mustn't be discouraged. There's always one step further down you can go. When you're lying in the gutter, feeling just a bit unsure, just wait until tomorrow. You may be lying flat face down in a sewer. Don't be afraid of a little raindrop. That don't mean nothing good. Just remember, one little raindrop started the Johnstown flood in Pennsylvania. When you're living on a park bench, eating grass 'cause you've no dough, your luck will change mañana. You may be 6 feet under, helping it grow. So just remember, when you're lower than low, there's always one step further down you can go.
When you think you've hit the bottom and you're feeling really low, you mustn't be discouraged. There's always one step further down you can go. Don't be afraid of a little rumble. What's that, for goodness sake? 'Cause surely, just remember, one little rumble started the Frisco quake.
In Pennsylvania?
When you're living on a park bench, eating grass 'cause you no dough, Your luck will change mañana.
You may be 6 feet under, hoping it grows.
So just remember when you're lower than low, there's always one step further down you can go. One step further down you can go. Go, go, Shirley!
Yes, go, Jane.